Have you ever sacrificed everything for someone, only to hear them say they're ashamed of you? I'm Calvin Madsen, a 72-year-old former mechanic who spent 4 decades with grease under my fingernails and silence in my heart, all to give my daughter Lindsay the life I never had. When she publicly humiliated me at her company party, saying she was ashamed to call me dad, I felt my world crumble. But then her CEO approached me with a shocking revelation that would change everything. "Why are you disrespecting our biggest investor?" A secret I'd kept for years was about to surface, along with decades of buried truths, family manipulations, and a revenge plot targeting everything I love. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the invisible sacrifices parents make, the secrets we keep to protect those we love, and what happens when the mask finally comes off. Follow my channel for a new chapter every week. Like this video if you've ever felt unappreciated by someone you sacrificed everything for, and comment where you're watching from. I never thought I'd be standing in a room full of suits, feeling like a stain on an expensive tablecloth. My name is Calvin Madsen, 72 years old with hands that never quite get clean no matter how hard I scrub. 40 years as a mechanic will do that to you. The grease becomes part of your fingerprints, embedded in the lines of your palms like a permanent reminder of your place in the world. "Dad, just try not to talk about cars all night, okay?" My daughter Lindsay whispered as we walked into the glass-walled atrium of Talentech's headquarters in Philadelphia. Her company was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and somehow, I'd made the guest list. "And please don't mention growing up in Lancaster. Just say we're from the Philadelphia area." I nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say. I wanted to remind her that I'd raised her alone after her mother died when she was 15, that I'd worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week, to put her through Wharton Business School, that I'd sold my father's garage, the only inheritance I had, just so she wouldn't graduate with debt. Instead, I said, "Sure, honey," and straightened the tie I bought yesterday at JCPenney. It was blue with tiny silver dots. The sales lady said it looked dignified. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Crystal chandeliers, waiters carrying trays of champagne, music that wasn't too loud, but just loud enough to make old men like me lean in uncomfortably when trying to hear. Lindsay immediately spotted someone important and touched my elbow. "Just mingle, Dad. Get some food. I need to talk to the VP of marketing." And just like that, she was gone, her black cocktail dress disappearing into a sea of important people. I stood there clutching my invitation like it was some kind of shield. A waiter passed by and I took a glass of champagne, more for something to do with my hands than any desire to drink. "First time at one of these events?" A voice came from beside me. A younger man, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a gray suit that probably cost more than my car. "That obvious, huh?" I tried to smile. "The deer in headlights look gives it away," he laughed. "I'm Jason, operations. Calvin, Lindsay Madsen's father." His eyebrows went up slightly. "Lindsay's father? Wow, she never mentions family." That stung more than it should have. "We don't talk much these days," I admitted. "She's busy building her career." "She's certainly doing that. One of our rising stars." Pride swelled in my chest. Despite everything, despite the distance she'd put between us, I was still so damn proud of her. Across the room I could see Lindsay talking animatedly to a group of well-dressed people. She was gesturing with her hands the way she did when she was excited about something, just like her mother used to. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the speaker system, "if I could have your attention, our CEO, Mr. Donovan Bright, would like to say a few words." Everyone turned toward the small stage where a tall, distinguished man with silver hair stood at a podium. Lindsay moved closer to the front, and I noticed how others seemed to make space for her. My little girl, so important now. 10 years ago, Talentech was just an idea, the CEO began. Today, we're revolutionizing how companies identify and develop talent across America. None of this would be possible without our incredible team. He began recognizing various executives and managers. I sipped my champagne, feeling increasingly out of place as applause erupted for each name called. And I'd especially like to recognize Lindsay Madsen, who joined us 3 years ago and has already transformed our operations division. My heart leapt as Lindsay stepped forward, smiling confidently as she climbed the 3 steps to the stage. She looked so professional, so grown up, so far from the girl who used to help me change oil filters on Saturdays, her tiny hands already learning to be useful. "Lindsay, Your innovative approach to our talent acquisition system has saved this company millions. You're the future of talent tech." The crowd applauded, and I clapped until my palms hurt. She was beaming up there, shaking hands with the CEO, accepting a small crystal award. Then something unexpected happened. The CEO leaned toward the microphone again. "Lindsay, I understand you have family here tonight." Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, my father is here somewhere. Would he like to come up? We should acknowledge the people behind our success stories." There was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where something dark crossed Lindsay's face. But she recovered quickly, scanning the crowd until she found me. "Dad," she called, her voice tight. "Come up here." The walk to the stage felt like miles. I could feel eyes on me, on my JCPenney tie, my worn shoes, my hands that I'd scrubbed raw but still couldn't get completely clean. I climbed the steps carefully, conscious of my bad knee, and stood awkwardly beside my daughter. "This is my father, Calvin," Lindsay said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the silent room. Then she added with a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes, "He doesn't understand anything about what I do. Sometimes he even embarrasses me a bit, but that's family, right?" A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Polite, uncomfortable, or maybe that was just how I felt. Polite, uncomfortable, and suddenly very small. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. The CEO shook my hand, and I was acutely aware of my calloused palm against his smooth one. As we stepped away from the podium, Lindsay whispered, "Just go get some food, Dad. I need to network." But as I turned to leave the stage, the microphone picked up her voice, soft but clear. "It's a miracle I got this far, considering how he held me back my entire life." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled slightly on the last step, steadying myself against the wall. She thought I hadn't heard. Maybe she didn't care if I had. I made my way to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and drank it in one burning gulp. 4 decades of sacrifice, of putting her needs before mine, of working until my back gave out. And that was how she saw me. A burden, an embarrassment, someone who held her back. I was about to leave, to call a taxi and go back to my empty apartment, when I noticed a tall figure moving purposefully through the crowd. It was Donovan Bright, the CEO, and he was walking directly toward me, and the look on his face told me that everything was about to change. I watched Donovan Bright approach me with the confidence of a man who'd never questioned his place in a room. My instinct was to step back, to make myself smaller. That's what 40 years of being invisible teaches you, how to disappear when needed. But something in his eyes kept me rooted to the spot. "Mr. Madsen," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, intentional, not the dismissive handshake people usually gave the old mechanic from Lancaster. "Would you mind joining me somewhere quieter? I believe we have matters to discuss." I followed him through the crowd, painfully aware of Lindsay watching us from across the room. Her expression was a mixture of confusion and alarm. I'd seen that look before, when she was 16 and I caught her sneaking out her bedroom window. The look that said, "My worlds are colliding in ways I never expected." Donovan led me to a small office off the main hall. The room smelled of leather and expensive cologne. He gestured to a chair across from a mahogany desk. "Whiskey?" he asked, already pouring 2 glasses from a crystal decanter. "Thank you," I said, accepting the glass. The whiskey was smooth, nothing like the bottom shelf stuff I kept in my cabinet at home. "I don't understand what this is about, Mr. Bright." He sat down, studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. 7 years ago, Talent Tech was on the verge of bankruptcy. We had a revolutionary algorithm for talent matching, but no capital to scale. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, an angel investor appeared. My throat tightened. The whiskey suddenly tasted bitter. "This investor was different," Donovan continued. "He wanted no control, no board seat, not even public acknowledgement. Just one condition, that we consider applications from a particular pool of recent Wharton graduates." The memory flooded back. Sitting in my lawyer's office, signing papers I barely understood, emptying my savings account and adding the proceeds from selling my father's garage, all to ensure Lindsay would find a place where her talents could shine. "I know it was you, Calvin," Donovan said quietly. "I've always known." I stared at my hands, lined, calloused, betraying a lifetime of manual labor. "How?" "I make it my business to know who's backing my company, even when they try to hide behind shell corporations and blind trusts." He smiled slightly. What I couldn't figure out was why. Why invest your life savings anonymously? I took another sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. She needed to make it on her own merit. If she knew I was involved, she'd never believe in herself the way I believe in her. Donovan nodded slowly. Your investment saved this company, Mr. Madsen. And your daughter has indeed proven herself. She's brilliant. Like her father, I suspect. I couldn't help but laugh. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky with some stocks. Lindsay got her brains from her mother. A mechanic who understood enough about business potential to make a remarkably prescient investment. He refilled my glass. Your initial investment has increased by 22 times its value, by the way. You're now our single largest individual shareholder. The room seemed to spin slightly. I'd never checked the value of my investment. Never wanted to know. It wasn't about the money. Does Lindsay know? I asked, dreading the answer. No. But after what I heard tonight, I'm thinking perhaps she should. I shook my head firmly. No, that's not why I did it. I don't want her gratitude. Or her guilt. What do you want, Calvin? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For 40 years, my wants had been secondary to Lindsay's needs. First as a struggling single father, then as a silent benefactor. I want her to be happy, I said simply, to be proud of what she's accomplished. Donovan studied me for a long moment. You know, most men in your position would use this information as leverage, to demand respect, recognition. Most men haven't had the privilege of watching their child grow into someone extraordinary, I replied. The whiskey was making me philosophical, loosening my usual reserve. Even if that growth means growing away from you. He nodded thoughtfully, then reached for his phone. I'm going to send for Lindsay. I think... No, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. Please, not tonight. She hurt you, Calvin, I heard what she said. I felt a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my aging heart. She's under a lot of pressure, trying to prove herself. All the more reason she should know the truth. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. It opened to reveal Lindsay, her professional composure slightly fractured by concern. Mr. Bright, is everything okay? Her eyes darted to me, then back to Donovan. Is my father bothering you? The word stung more than I cared to admit. I started to rise, ready to excuse myself, but Donovan's hand on my shoulder kept me seated. Actually, Lindsay, I was just telling your father how much we appreciate having him here tonight. His voice carried an authority that seemed to surprise her. Did you know that your father is one of the most insightful business minds I've had the pleasure to meet? Lindsay's expression shifted from concern to confusion. My father? There must be some mistake. He's a retired mechanic. Among other things, Donovan replied cryptically. I believe there's much about your father you don't know. I could see the calculations happening behind Lindsay's eyes. The daughter I raised was nothing if not quick. What's going on here? She asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Donovan looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave an almost imperceptible shake of my head. Not yet, maybe not ever. Your father and I were just discussing the early days of Talent Tech, Donovan said smoothly. He has quite an interest in corporate growth strategies. Lindsay's eyebrows shot up. Dad? He doesn't even use online banking. From the corner of the room, I spotted Lindsay's husband, Todd, peering through the doorway. His face wore an expression I couldn't quite place. Curiosity mixed with something darker. He'd never liked me much. Thought I wasn't good enough for his wife's family pedigree, despite his own middle-class upbringing. Some of the best business minds understand value at its most fundamental level, Donovan was saying. Your father has that gift. Lindsay looked at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps she was. I stood up, feeling suddenly very tired. I should get going. It's past my bedtime. I tried to smile, to ease the tension crackling in the air. Thank you for the whiskey, Mr. Bright, and for the conversation. As I passed Lindsay on my way out, I caught the scent of her perfume, the same brand her mother used to wear. For a moment, I was transported back 20 years, teaching her to drive in our old pickup truck, both of us laughing as she ground the gears. Dad? Her voice pulled me back to the present. There was uncertainty there, questions forming. Good night, sweetheart, I said softly. I'm proud of you, always have been. I walked out of the office, past Todd with his calculating eyes, through the crowd of strangers in expensive clothes. Behind me, I could hear Lindsay's voice, urgent and confused, asking Donovan what we'd really been discussing. Some secrets are best kept. even when keeping them breaks your heart a little more each day. 3 days passed before I heard from Lindsay. 3 days of sitting in my small apartment overlooking Fairmount Park, watching the joggers and dog walkers below, wondering if I'd made a mistake all those years ago. The call came on a Wednesday morning as I was fixing my ancient coffee maker. Some habits you never lose even when you can afford to buy new things. "Dad?" Lindsay's voice sounded different, hesitant. "Can I come over? We need to talk." An hour later, she was at my door. Gone was the confident executive from the party, replaced by someone who looked more like the uncertain teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. She wore jeans and a pen sweatshirt, clothes she'd never wear to the office. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she carried a folder tucked under her arm. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Coffee's fresh." She walked into my living room, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. The worn leather recliner, the bookshelf filled with repair manuals and the few paperback mysteries I enjoyed, the faded photographs on the wall. Her gaze lingered on a picture of us at her college graduation, both of us beaming with pride. "You've kept this place exactly the same," she said, accepting the mug of coffee I offered. "I like consistency," I replied, settling into my chair. "What's on your mind, Lindsay?" She sat on the edge of the sofa, perched like a bird ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. Her fingers tapped nervously against the folder in her lap. "Mr. Bright called me into his office yesterday," she began, her voice carefully controlled. "He showed me some documents, investment records from 7 years ago." My heart skipped a beat. So Donovan had decided to tell her after all. I remained silent, watching my daughter's face as she struggled with whatever she had learned. "Dad, did you invest in Talentech when it was starting out? Did you put money into the company where I work?" I looked down at my coffee, buying time. Part of me wanted to deny it, to preserve the fiction we'd both been living with, but I was tired of secrets. "Yes," I said simply. "How much?" Her voice had an edge now, a sharpness I recognized from her mother when she was angry but trying to hide it. "Everything I had? The proceeds from selling the garage, my retirement savings, some stocks your grandfather left me. That's..." She opened the folder, glanced at a document, then looked up with wide eyes. "That's over $2 million, Dad. Where did you get that kind of money?" I shrugged. "The garage was worth more than you might think. Prime location. Developer wanted the land. And I'd been saving since before you were born. Never spent much on myself. Why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in her voice was palpable. "Would it have mattered?" I asked gently. "Would you have taken the job if you'd known?" "Of course not." She stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? People will think I only got hired because my father bought me a position." "That's not true," I said firmly. "Donovan didn't even know you were my daughter when they hired you. I made sure of that. The only condition of my investment was that they consider applications from recent Wharton graduates. That's all. You earned everything after that on your own merit." She stopped pacing, her back to me, shoulders rigid. "Why would you do this? Why go behind my back?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken history. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of silence. "Do you remember what you said to me when you were 22? I asked quietly. "Right after you graduated?" She turned slowly to face me. "I said a lot of things back then. You said you never wanted to depend on handouts from any man, not even your own father, that you wanted to make it on your own." Recognition flickered across her face. "And you respected that by secretly financing the company that hired me. I respected it by giving you the chance to prove yourself without anyone knowing about me. I never interfered with your career, Lindsay. Never asked for special treatment for you, I just opened a door. You walked through it on your own." She sank back onto the sofa, the anger seeming to drain out of her. "All these years, I thought..." She paused, shaking her head. "I thought you didn't understand my ambitions. That you wanted me to take over the garage, stay in Lancaster, live a small life." The misunderstanding pierced my heart. "Is that why you pulled away? Why you stopped coming home for holidays? Why you started being embarrassed by me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed to break free, to be my own person. And I wanted that for you too," I said softly. "Everything I've ever done, Lindsay, was to give you choices I never had." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my throat tightened. "Mr. Bright said you're now the largest individual shareholder in the company. That your initial investment has multiplied many times over. I nodded. Apparently so. I haven't checked the value in years. It wasn't about the money. Then what was it about, Dad? The question was so simple, yet the answer encompassed my entire life since the moment she was placed in my arms. A tiny bundle with her mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. It was about love, I said finally. The kind that wants nothing in return except to see you fly. For a moment I thought I'd reached her, broken through the walls that had grown between us, but then her phone buzzed, and the spell was broken. She glanced at the screen, her expression changing instantly. "It's Todd," she said, standing again. "He's downstairs. We have a dinner reservation." "Of course," I said, rising from my chair with effort. My knees weren't what they used to be. "Don't keep him waiting." She gathered her things, hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me briefly. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact in years. "We'll talk more about this," she promised. "But Dad, no more secrets, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If she only knew that the investment was just the beginning of the secrets I'd kept to protect her. As she reached the door, she turned back. Why did Mr. Bright decide to tell me now? After all these years? I thought about the party, about her words that she hadn't realized I'd overheard. "I think he believes families should understand each other, even the parts that are uncomfortable." She frowned slightly, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "He mentioned something else too, something about documents that needed signing. A new subsidiary company? He said you might know something about it." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Did he mention any details? Just that Todd has been helping set it up, that I'd be named as co-director. She shrugged. "Corporate stuff. Probably boring to you." But it wasn't boring. It was alarming. Because 2 days ago I'd received a strange email from Donovan's office, a courtesy notification about documents being processed under my investment portfolio, documents I'd never authorized. "Lindsay," I said carefully, "before you sign anything, would you let me look it over? Just humor an old man." She laughed, the sound forced. "Sure, Dad, but I doubt you'd understand all the legalese." "You'd be surprised," I murmured. After she left, I stood at the window, watching as she emerged onto the street below. Todd was waiting in his black Tesla, sleek and expensive like everything in his life. I saw him kiss her briefly as she got in, saw his hand on her shoulder. But what bothered me most was what I couldn't see, the expression on his face when she wasn't looking at him. I picked up my phone and dialed Donovan Bright's number. It was time to find out what my son-in-law was really up to. Meeting Donovan Bright at 7 a.m. in a nearly empty diner in South Philly wasn't how I'd planned to spend my Thursday morning. The place smelled of bacon grease and strong coffee, reminding me of the early breakfasts I'd have before opening the garage. Donovan looked out of place in his tailored suit, but he seemed comfortable enough, nodding to the waitress who kept his mug filled. "I appreciate you meeting me so early," I said, sliding into the vinyl booth across from him. "And somewhere discreet." "I figured this conversation wasn't meant for corporate ears," he replied, pushing a manila folder across the table. "These are the documents I mentioned, the ones being processed under your investment portfolio." I opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were legal papers for a new company called Madison Innovations LLC. The similarity to my last name wasn't lost on me, just different enough to seem coincidental, just similar enough to connect back to me if needed. "Madison Innovations," I read aloud. "What exactly is this supposed to be?" "On paper, a technology incubator." Donovan stirred his coffee methodically. "In reality, it appears to be a shell company designed to funnel Talentech intellectual property and client relationships away from the main corporation." I flipped through the documents, my eyes catching on familiar names. "Lindsay is listed as co-director alongside Todd." "Yes, though I suspect she hasn't seen these papers yet." My stomach twisted as I reached the investor page. There it was, my blind trust listed as the primary capital source, authorizing a transfer of $4.5 million in seed funding. "I never authorized this," I said, my voice tight with anger. "I never even knew about it." "I didn't think you had." Donovan's face was grim. "The authorization appears to have come through your financial advisor, a Mr. Gerald Winters." The name hit me like a physical blow. "Winters? That's impossible. Jerry Winters was disbarred 8 years ago for financial fraud. He can't practice law anymore. And yet his signature appears on these documents." Donovan tapped a page near the back. along with what purports to be yours. I stared at the signature. It was close, damned close, but not mine. Someone had forged my name, and not for the first time, I suspected. This isn't my first run-in with Winters, I said quietly. 22 years ago, he represented a client who filed a fraudulent lawsuit against my garage. Claimed one of my mechanics damaged his car's engine during a routine oil change. Nearly bankrupted me fighting it. Did you win? Eventually. But not before Winters dragged my reputation through the mud. Called me an incompetent small-town mechanic who was too stupid to understand modern engines. The memory still stung after all these years. The judge finally threw the case out when the plaintiff's story fell apart under cross-examination. Donovan was watching me carefully. And the plaintiff? Do you remember who it was? I laughed bitterly. How could I forget? Martin Kessler, real estate developer from Lancaster, wanted my property for a shopping center he was building. I paused, the pieces suddenly connecting in my mind. Martin Kessler is Todd's uncle. The diner seemed to grow quieter, the background clatter of dishes and murmured conversations fading away as the implications sank in. You think this isn't a coincidence? Donovan said. It wasn't a question. 22 years is a long time to hold a grudge, I admitted. But Kessler lost millions when his development fell through after he couldn't get my land. And now his nephew is married to your daughter and trying to siphon off your investment. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. It sounds paranoid when you say it out loud. I've been in business long enough to know that paranoia and pattern recognition often look the same. Donovan closed the folder. The question is, what do we do about it? What indeed? If I confronted Todd directly, Lindsay would be caught in the middle. If I went to the authorities, the scandal could damage Talentech, and Lindsay's career along with it. Every path seemed to lead to hurting my daughter. I need proof, I said finally. Concrete evidence that Todd is working with Winters and Kessler. Something Lindsay can't dismiss. Donovan nodded slowly. I have a security team. Discreet professionals who handle sensitive corporate matters. I could put them on this. No, I said firmly. This is my fight. My family. I thought for a moment. But I could use access to Todd's company email, and any meetings he's had at Talentech regarding Madison Innovations. A slight smile touched Donovan's lips. You know, for someone who claims to be just a mechanic, you think like an investigator. I shrugged. I almost joined the police academy back in '89. Had the application filled out and everything. What stopped you? Lindsay's mother got pregnant. Needed stability, not a rookie cop's dangerous schedule and low pay. I stared into my coffee. Never regretted that choice, not once. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of past decisions and present dangers hanging between us. I'll get you what you need, Donovan said finally. But be careful, Calvin. If they've gone to these lengths already, I know. I did know. Men like Kessler and Winters played by different rules than honest folks. I need one more thing. Name it. Keep Lindsay away from any Madison Innovations paperwork for as long as you can. Delay meetings, request revisions, whatever it takes. I need time. He nodded. I can do that, but not indefinitely. 2 weeks, I said. Give me 2 weeks to find the truth. As I left the diner, the morning sun was breaking through Philadelphia's skyline, painting the old buildings in gold. I used to bring Lindsay here as a child, to the Franklin Institute and the Art Museum. She'd loved the city, its energy and possibilities. Even then, I'd known she wouldn't stay in Lancaster forever. I'd prepared myself for her to leave, to build her own life. I just never prepared for her to become a pawn in someone else's revenge. Back in my apartment, I pulled out an old cardboard box from the back of my closet. Inside were case files from the lawsuit Winters had filed against me. Papers I'd kept all these years, partly as a reminder to always be careful, partly because something about the case had never felt fully resolved. As I spread the yellowed documents across my kitchen table, memories flooded back. The sleepless nights worrying about losing everything, the strain it put on my marriage, the way Lindsay had overheard us arguing about money and had started saving her allowance in a jar labeled, "To help Daddy's garage." One name on an old witness list caught my eye. Nathan Pritchard, former paralegal at Winters' law firm. He'd been young back then, fresh out of school. He'd also been the one who'd looked uncomfortable throughout the proceedings, who'd avoided eye contact whenever Winters made particularly outrageous claims. I picked up my phone and did something I'd never done before. I used the internet search app Lindsay had installed for me last Christmas. Nathan Pritchard, attorney, Philadelphia. I typed slowly, one finger at a time. The results loaded quickly. Nathan Pritchard, now a partner at Davis & Whitman, specializing in corporate ethics and whistleblower cases. His office was 20 minutes away. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how deep you try to put it. Sometimes it rises up and offers you a chance to finally set things right. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. It was time to reconnect with an old acquaintance, and hopefully find the ammunition I needed to protect my daughter from the man she'd married. The law offices of Davis & Whitman occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower in Center City, Philadelphia. As I sat in the reception area, my worn leather jacket and faded jeans stood out against the sleek modern furniture and abstract art. The young receptionist had given me a curious look when I'd asked for Nathan Pritchard without an appointment, but she'd made the call anyway. "Mr. Pritchard will see you in 5 minutes, Mr. Madsen," she informed me, her professionally polite smile never reaching her eyes. "Can I get you some water or coffee while you wait?" I declined, too nervous to put anything in my stomach. The folder with the old case documents felt heavy on my lap, weighted with more than just paper. When Nathan Pritchard emerged from a corridor, I almost didn't recognize him. The nervous young paralegal from 22 years ago had transformed into a confident attorney in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and stylish glasses. But when he saw me, a flicker of recognition, and something else, something like guilt, crossed his face. "Mr. Madsen," he said, extending his hand. "This is unexpected." "I appreciate you seeing me without an appointment," I replied, following him through glass doors into a corner office with a view of City Hall. "Hard to forget a case like yours," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat across from his desk. "One of the first I worked on with Gerald Winters." He grimaced slightly. Not one of my prouder professional moments. I laid the folder on his desk. "I'm guessing you knew the lawsuit was fraudulent." He didn't answer immediately, instead walking to his office door and closing it firmly. When he returned to his desk, his professional demeanor had slipped, revealing something more human underneath. "Mr. Madsen, attorney-client privilege is supposed to last forever, but given that Winters was disbarred, and that particular case was problematic, to say the least." He sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. "Yes, I knew. Kessler and Winters cooked up the whole thing to force you to sell your property. Even though I'd suspected as much for years, hearing the confirmation made my blood boil. They nearly ruined me." "I know," he said quietly. "I tried to suggest settlement options, ways to minimize the damage to you, but Winters wouldn't hear of it. He wanted to make an example of you." "Why? What had I ever done to him?" Pritchard put his glasses back on, his expression grim. "Nothing. You were just convenient. Kessler wanted your land, and Winters enjoyed breaking people he considered beneath him. Small-town businessmen without fancy degrees or connections." He looked genuinely remorseful. "It wasn't personal to them, just business. But I always knew it was deeply personal to you." I leaned forward. "And now they're targeting me again, this time through my daughter." His eyebrows shot up. "Winters is still disbarred. He can't practice. But he can advise behind the scenes," I countered, explaining about Madison Innovations, the forged signatures, and Todd's connection to Kessler. With each detail I shared, Pritchard's expression grew more troubled. "This is serious, Mr. Madsen. Securities fraud, identity theft, misappropriation of corporate assets." He shook his head. "Your son-in-law could be looking at federal charges, and my daughter could be implicated," I said, voicing my greatest fear. "She's listed as co-director, but I don't think she knows what's really happening." Pritchard tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. "I might be able to help. I still have documentation from the old case, notes I kept privately, conversations I recorded." He must have seen my surprise because he added, "I knew even then that what Winters was doing was unethical. I kept evidence as insurance." Hope flickered to life within me. "Would you be willing to share that?" "Under normal circumstances, no. But if Winters is involved in this new scheme," he nodded firmly. "Yes, I'll help you. It might be a way to finally make amends for my part in what happened to you." As I left his office an hour later, copies of his notes tucked safely in my jacket pocket, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The feeling was short-lived. When I returned to my apartment building, I found Lindsay sitting on the steps outside, her face streaked with tears. She jumped up when she saw me. anger and confusion battling for dominance in her expression. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "I've been calling you for hours." I reached for my phone, realizing I'd left it on silent after my meeting with Donovan. 5 missed calls from Lindsay, 3 from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, honey. I had some errands to run." "What's wrong?" She thrust an envelope at me, her hand shaking. "This was delivered to my office today. Someone slipped it under my door." I opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, old, slightly faded, of me standing next to a young woman who wasn't Lindsay's mother. We were smiling at the camera, my arm around her shoulders. On the back, written in faded blue ink, "Calvin and April, 1982. My heart stopped. April, a name I hadn't spoken aloud in decades. "Who is she, Dad?" Lindsay's voice cracked with emotion. "And why did someone send this to me with a note saying, 'Ask your father about his other family'?" The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This was what Todd and his accomplices had been planning, not just to steal my investment, but to destroy my relationship with Lindsay completely. "Let's go inside," I said quietly. "This isn't a conversation for the street." Once in my apartment, Lindsay paced the living room while I made tea neither of us would drink. My hands trembled as I filled the kettle, my mind racing. After all these years of protection and secrets, everything was about to come crashing down. "Who is she?" Lindsay repeated when I returned to the living room. "And don't lie to me. I've had enough secrets and lies." I sat heavily in my chair, feeling every one of my 72 years. "April Simmons was my first love," I said finally. "We met in high school, dated through graduation. When I went to community college and she went to nursing school, we stayed together. Planned to get married after we finished." Lindsay stopped pacing, watching me intently. And she got pregnant our senior year of college." The words felt strange in my mouth after so long. We were young, scared, but committed to each other, to our baby. Lindsay sank onto the sofa, her face pale. "I have a sibling? A brother or sister you never told me about?" The pain in her voice cut through me like a blade. "No, Lindsay. April lost the baby in her 6th month. A boy. We were going to name him James, after my father." "Oh." The single syllable contained a mixture of relief and new grief. The loss. It broke something between us. April fell into depression. I didn't know how to help her. We drifted apart, eventually broke up. I stared at my hands, remembering how helpless they had felt back then. 2 years later, I met your mother, and April moved away. To Chicago, I heard. Lindsay was quiet for a long moment. "That's sad, Dad. But why would someone send this to me like it's some kind of dark secret? And what did they mean by other family?" The moment of truth had arrived. The secret I'd kept for decades, not just from Lindsay, but from everyone except one person, her mother. "Because April contacted me a year before your mother died," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She'd had a daughter, Emma, and she believed, she was sure, that Emma was mine." Lindsay's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. "You have another daughter?" "I don't know," I admitted. "April and we met once, briefly after we broke up. It was possible. Your mother and we discussed it. I was going to take a paternity test, try to do right by everyone, but then your mother got sick and everything else just stopped mattering." "So you abandoned this girl? Your possible daughter?" Lindsay's voice was rising. "No. I set up a trust fund for her, sent money for her education. But April didn't want me in their lives, not directly. She'd remarried. Her husband had adopted Emma legally. They were a family. And you never told me? All these years I might have had a sister and you never said a word?" The hurt in her eyes was unbearable. "I was trying to protect you," I said weakly. "After your mother died, you were so fragile. The thought of introducing this complication, this stranger, that wasn't your decision to make." Lindsay stood abruptly. "All these years I thought I knew you. Thought I was your only priority, your whole world. But you had this secret life." "Lindsay, please, no." She gathered her purse, her movements jerky with emotion. "I need time to process this. Time away from you and your lies." As she stormed toward the door, I called out, "Lindsay, wait. There's something else you need to know. About Todd." But the door slammed shut, cutting off my words. She was gone, back to the man who was manipulating her, using her pain against me. I sank back into my chair, the photograph still clutched in my hand. April's smiling face looked up at me. A ghost from a past I'd never fully laid to rest. Somewhere out there was a young woman who might be my daughter, and here was another, my flesh and blood, walking away from me, perhaps for the last time. The kettle in the kitchen began to whistle, high and lonely, like a train departing for a destination I couldn't follow. 3 days passed without a word from Lindsay. I called. I texted. I even drove past her Rittenhouse Square apartment one evening, like some lovesick teenager just to see lights in the windows and know she was home. But she didn't respond. On the 4th day, my doorbell rang at 7:30 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, reviewing the documents Nathan Pritchard had given me. My heart leapt at the sound, hope surging that it might be Lindsay, ready to talk. Instead, when I opened the door, I found a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked dark hair. It took me a moment to recognize her. "Amelia," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Amelia Stevens, my late wife's sister, hadn't spoken to me in almost a decade. After Catherine died, Amelia had made it clear she blamed me somehow, as if I could have prevented the cancer that took her sister. Our last conversation had ended with her telling me I'd never been good enough for Catherine. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice just like my wife's, that same mainline Philadelphia accent that had always made Catherine sound more sophisticated than her mechanic husband. I stepped aside, allowing her into my apartment. She looked around with barely disguised disapproval, noting the simple furnishings, the faded photographs, the stack of documents on my kitchen table. "I saw Lindsay 2 days ago," she said without preamble. "She's very upset." "I know," I replied, my throat tight. "Did she tell you why?" Amelia's perfectly manicured hand brushed invisible lint from her cashmere sweater. "Yes, about this other woman, this possible child." The judgment in her voice was unmistakable. I'd been tried and convicted without a chance to defend myself, the same way it had always been with Amelia. "It's complicated," I said. "It always is with men like you." She sat on the edge of my sofa, as if afraid it might soil her designer slacks. "Lindsay is convinced you've been living a double life, that you never really loved Catherine, that everything she thought she knew about her family is a lie." Anger flared in my chest. "That's not true. I loved Catherine more than anything. She knew about April, about the possibility of Emma. We discussed it together, decided together how to handle it." Amelia's eyebrows rose slightly. "Did you? Because that's not how Catherine presented it to me." "What do you mean?" The room suddenly felt colder. "She came to me about a month before she died. She was upset. Said you'd been contacted by an old girlfriend who claimed you had fathered her child, that you were considering taking a paternity test, possibly bringing this stranger into your lives." I stared at her, confusion warring with disbelief. "That's not how it happened." Catherine and I agreed. "Catherine was protecting Lindsay," Amelia interrupted. "She didn't want her to know how close you came to fracturing their family." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "She asked me to give you this after she was gone. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Until now." With trembling hands, I unwrapped the tissue. Inside was a stack of envelopes, yellowed with age, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I recognized Lindsay's childish handwriting immediately. "What are these?" "Letters," Amelia said softly. "From Lindsay to you. She wrote them every year on Father's Day, starting when she was 7. Catherine kept them." "Kept them? Why would she keep letters from Lindsay to me?" Amelia looked away, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Because they weren't the kind of letters a daughter should write to her father." I untied the ribbon with fingers that felt numb, opening the top envelope. Inside was a card handmade from construction paper, covered in glitter and crayon hearts. "To Daddy," it read in a child's careful printing. "I'm sorry I made you and Mommy fight. I'll try to be better so you won't be mad anymore. I love you even when you're scary. Love, Lindsay." My vision blurred with tears. "I don't understand. Lindsay and I were close. We never fought. I was never scary to her. Catherine was trying to protect you both," Amelia said, her voice gentler now. "Lindsay went through a phase where she was acting out at school. Nothing serious, talking back to teachers, not doing homework. Catherine told her it was disappointing you, making you angry. She thought it would motivate Lindsay to behave. But I never knew about any of this," I protested, flipping through more letters, years of them, each containing apologies for imagined offenses, promises to be good enough to earn my love. That was the point. Catherine managed Lindsay's behavior so you wouldn't have to be the bad guy. She wanted you to have the perfect relationship with your daughter. Amelia's eyes were damp now too. She loved you both so much she was willing to be the villain. I sat heavily on my chair, the letters scattered across my lap. All those years I'd thought Lindsay and I had a perfect understanding, a bond nothing could break. And all along, Catherine had been orchestrating it, filtering our relationship through her own interventions. Why tell me this now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Because Lindsay is about to make a terrible mistake, Amelia said. She's convinced that you betrayed her mother, that your whole family life was a lie. She's turning to Todd for support, letting him make decisions for her. My head snapped up. What decisions? She's planning to sign some business agreement tomorrow. Something about a new company division she'll be heading. Todd says it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Madison Innovations. They were moving forward despite Donovan's attempts to delay. Amelia, I need to see Lindsay. Today. Now. This agreement. It's a fraud. Todd is using her to steal my investment in Talentech. She looked skeptical. Calvin, I know you're upset about the rift with Lindsay, but making accusations against her husband, it's not an accusation. I have proof. I gestured to the documents on my kitchen table. Todd is working with Martin Kessler and Gerald Winters, the same men who tried to destroy my business 20 years ago. They're using Lindsay to get to me. Something in my expression must have convinced her because she stood abruptly. I'll take you to her. She's staying at my house in Chestnut Hill. She didn't want to be at her apartment in case you came looking for her there. The irony might have made me laugh under different circumstances. 40 minutes later, Amelia's Mercedes pulled up to an elegant stone colonial in Philadelphia's old money neighborhood. Lindsay's car was in the circular driveway, alongside Todd's Tesla. He's here, I muttered, my stomach clenching. Good, Amelia said, surprising me. Better to deal with this all at once. Inside, the house was cool and quiet, filled with antiques and family heirlooms I recognized from Catherine's childhood home. I'd always felt out of place here, a working-class intruder in this world of inherited wealth and privilege. Lindsay and Todd were in the sunroom, papers spread out on a glass table between them. She looked up as we entered, her face paling when she saw me. What is he doing here? She demanded, glaring at her aunt. Hearing the truth for once, Todd answered before Amelia could speak. He stood, tall and confident in his cashmere sweater and designer jeans. Hello, Calvin. Come to make more excuses for your lies? I've come to stop you from destroying my daughter's career, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And to give her these. I placed the stack of childhood letters on the table. Letters she wrote to me that her mother never delivered. Letters that made her believe I was disappointed in her, angry with her when I never was. Lindsay stared at the letters, recognition dawning in her eyes. My Father's Day cards, she whispered. Mom said you read them every year, that you kept them in your bedside drawer. I never saw them until today, I said gently. Your mother was trying to protect us both in her own way, just like I was trying to protect you by not telling you about April and Emma after she died. Todd stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Lindsay's shoulder. More manipulation, he said smoothly. Don't you see, Lindsay? He's trying to drive a wedge between us, just like he always has. I looked directly at my daughter, ignoring Todd completely. Lindsay, listen to me. The company agreement you're about to sign, Madison Innovations, it's a fraud. Todd is using your name, your position at Talentech, to steal my investment in the company. He's working with his uncle, Martin Kessler, and a disbarred lawyer named Gerald Winters. Lindsay's eyes widened. That's ridiculous. Tell him, Todd. But Todd's face had hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. You have no proof of these absurd accusations. Actually, I do. I reached into my jacket pocket, withdrawing the documents Nathan Pritchard had given me. Affidavits, recorded conversations, bank transfers, 20 years of planning, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back at me through the person I love most. Lindsay took the papers with trembling hands. I don't understand. Why would Todd? Why would anyone do this? Because my land stood in the way of a multi-million-dollar development 20 years ago, I explained. Because men like Kessler and Winters don't forget when someone like me, someone they consider beneath them, wins. Todd's hand tightened on Lindsay's shoulder. Don't listen to him. He's desperate, making up stories because he knows you've finally seen through his lies about your mother. Lindsay shrugged off his hand, reading through the documents with growing horror. There's my signature, she said, pointing to a page. But I never signed this. They forged it, I said gently, just like they forged mine. She looked up at Todd, years of trust and love crumbling before my eyes. Is this true? Have you been using me to get to my father? The mask finally slipped. Todd's handsome face contorted with a sneer. Your father is nothing. A glorified grease monkey who got lucky with some investments. Do you have any idea how it feels to hear you brag about him? My dad worked so hard for me. My dad sacrificed everything for me. It's pathetic. Each word was a knife, but not into my heart, into Lindsay's. I watched as the color drained from her face as the man she'd married revealed his true nature. You married me to get revenge on my father? Her voice was barely audible. Not at first, Todd admitted with a shrug. At first it was just convenient, the daughter of Talentech's secret investor. But when Uncle Marty realized who your father was, well, let's just say it added a certain poetic justice to the plan. I stepped forward, unable to bear my daughter's pain any longer. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out before I forget that I've spent my life trying to be a better man than you'll ever be. Todd laughed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He'd underestimated me. Again. This isn't over, old man. Yes, Lindsay said, rising to stand beside me. It is. In that moment, I saw Catherine in her. The same quiet strength, the same unwavering certainty once a decision was made. Todd must have seen it too because he backed away, gathered his papers with jerky movements and left without another word. As the front door slammed behind him, Lindsay collapsed into tears, decades of misunderstandings and manipulations finally breaking through her carefully constructed composure. I held her as she sobbed, my own tears mingling with hers. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered against my shoulder, for everything I said at the party, for doubting you. Shh, I soothed, stroking her hair as I had when she was small. None of that matters now. But even as I comforted my daughter, I knew that Todd's parting words weren't empty. This wasn't over. Men like him, like Kessler, like Winters, they didn't accept defeat gracefully. The battle for my daughter's trust was won, but the war for her future, for both our futures, was just beginning. The next morning dawned gray and drizzling, a fitting backdrop to the somber mood at Amelia's house. Lindsay had barely slept, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen as she nursed a cup of coffee at the kitchen island. I wasn't in much better shape, having spent most of the night on Amelia's uncomfortable guest room sofa, turning over possibilities in my mind. What happens now? Lindsay asked, her voice small and raw. With Todd? With Talentech? With everything? I sighed, feeling the weight of my 72 years pressing down on my shoulders. We need to talk to Donovan. Show him the evidence. He can help us make sure Todd and his accomplices face consequences for what they tried to do. She nodded absently, staring into her coffee as if it might contain answers we both desperately needed. And us? What happens with us? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with decades of misunderstandings and half-truths. Before I could answer, my phone rang, Donovan Bright's name flashing on the screen. Calvin, he said without preamble when I answered. We have a problem. Todd came to my office last night with a complete proposal for Madison Innovations. Said you'd approved it, showed me documents with your signature. My stomach clenched. It's a forgery, Donovan. I can prove it. I know that, he replied, his voice tight. But he's gone to the board with it. Called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. He's claiming you're mentally incompetent, that Lindsay has power of attorney, and that she's authorized him to act on your behalf. Lindsay, who could hear his voice through the phone, gasped. That's a lie. I never signed anything like that. He has documents that say otherwise, Donovan said grimly. Very convincing ones. The board is concerned. Your investment represents nearly 30% of our capital structure, Calvin. If there's any question about its management, we'll be there, I said firmly. Lindsay and I both. With our evidence. After I hung up, Lindsay's face was ashen. He's really trying to steal everything from you, from us. He won't succeed, I assured her with more confidence than I felt. We know the truth now. That's half the battle. She reached across the table and took my hand, the first time she'd initiated such contact in years. Her fingers were cold against my weathered skin. I'm so sorry, Dad. All those years I spent pulling away from you, embarrassed by you, while you were secretly supporting my career, protecting me. The irony of it all threatened to overwhelm me. I'd spent my life trying to give Lindsay everything to make her proud, only to have her ashamed of the very things that made me who I was. My work-roughened hands, my simple clothes, my straightforward manner. We both made mistakes, I said gently. Let's focus on fixing what we can now. 3 hours later, we sat in Donovan's office, joined by Nathan Pritchard and a grim-faced lawyer from Talentech's legal department. The evidence against Todd, Winters, and Kessler was substantial. Forged documents, fabricated power of attorney papers, shell companies designed to siphon intellectual property and client relationships from Talentech. This is enough to bring criminal charges, Talentech's lawyer confirmed, leafing through the papers. Securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. Mr. Warner could be looking at serious prison time. Lindsay flinched at the mention of her husband's potential incarceration. Despite everything, 5 years of marriage couldn't be erased in a single day of revelations. What about the company, I asked. How exposed is Talentech? Donovan's expression was grave. If this had gone through? Devastating. The structure they created would have given them access to our proprietary algorithms, our client database, everything that makes us valuable. And now? Lindsay asked. Now we contain it. He looked at her with sympathy. But Lindsay, I have to be honest. Your position in the company is compromised. Even if you had no knowledge of your husband's actions, the appearance of impropriety. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I'll resign. No, I said firmly, surprising everyone, including myself. Lindsay has done nothing wrong. She's a victim in this just as much as Talentech. Calvin, Donovan began, but I cut him off. What if I divested? The words came without conscious thought, but as soon as they were spoken, I knew they were right. What if I sold my shares in Talentech to an independent third party? Would that remove the appearance of impropriety? The room fell silent. My investment in Talentech represented the bulk of my net worth, the security of my retirement, the legacy I'd hoped to leave Lindsay someday. Dad, no, Lindsay protested. That money is everything you've worked for. You're everything I've worked for. I corrected her gently. The money was only ever a means to an end, giving you opportunities, security, a chance to build the life you wanted. Donovan was watching me carefully. It would certainly create distance, he admitted. But Calvin, at current valuation, your shares are worth— I know what they're worth, I interrupted. And I know what my daughter's reputation is worth. The Talentech lawyer cleared his throat. There might be another option. If Mr. Madsen were to transfer his shares to a blind trust, with independent management and strict governance protocols, it could create sufficient separation while preserving his investment. Hope flickered in Lindsay's eyes. Would that work? Could I stay at Talentech? In a reduced capacity initially, Donovan said slowly. We'd need to demonstrate to the board, to our clients, that we've addressed all potential conflicts of interest. But yes, over time, you could rebuild. I nodded, relief washing over me. Then that's what we'll do. Nathan Pritchard, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. There's still the matter of criminal charges against Todd Warner, Gerald Winters, and Martin Kessler. As the primary victim, Mr. Madsen, you would need to make a formal complaint to the authorities. And there it was, the choice I'd been dreading. Pursuing justice would mean a public scandal, a court case where Lindsay's marriage and my family history would be picked apart in the open. The story of April and Emma would likely come out. The manipulations by Catherine, the strained relationship with Amelia, all of it exposed for strangers to judge. But letting them walk away unpunished meant they might try again, targeting someone else vulnerable. And it would mean living in fear, always watching over our shoulders. I looked at Lindsay, silently asking what she wanted. She straightened her shoulders, her jaw set in determination. We press charges, she said firmly. All of it. No more secrets, no more hiding. My heart swelled with pride. Even in her darkest moment, facing the collapse of her marriage and career, my daughter showed more courage than I'd ever had. There's one more thing, I said, making a decision I'd been avoiding for decades. I want to find Emma. Lindsay's eyes widened. April's daughter. The one who might be my daughter, I said firmly. Whether DNA confirms it or not, I've been sending money for her education, her future, for over 20 years. It's time I met her, if she wants to meet me. Lindsay was quiet for a long moment, emotions playing across her face. Uncertainty, jealousy, curiosity. Finally, she nodded. I'd like to meet her too. My sister. The word hung in the air between us, strange and new and full of possibility. As we left Donovan's office, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight that had broken through the morning's rain clouds, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be difficult. Legal battles, professional setbacks, the painful process of Lindsay's divorce, the uncertain search for Emma. But for the first time in decades, we would face these challenges together, without secrets between us. Lindsay linked her arm through mine as we walked to the parking garage. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she asked. "What's that?" "That night at the company party, when I said those terrible things about you." Her voice caught. "And all along, you were the reason Talentech even existed." "That's not important now," I assured her. "It is to me." She stopped, turning to face me fully. "All my life, I thought I needed to escape you, your world, to become something greater. I never realized you were already everything I aspired to be. Honest, hardworking, selfless." The words healed something deep inside me that had been broken for longer than I cared to admit. "Well," I said, my voice rough with emotion, "we have time to get to know each other properly now. No more masks, no more pretending." She smiled then, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd like that very much." As we drove away from Talentech headquarters, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the gleaming glass tower, where my investment had helped build something lasting and valuable. I felt no regret at the prospect of placing those shares in a blind trust, of potentially losing some control over the wealth I'd accumulated. Some investments yielded returns that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The woman sitting beside me, my daughter in all the ways that truly mattered, was proof of that. 6 months can change everything. The maple trees outside my apartment window were shedding their autumn colors when the dust finally began to settle on the storm that had upended our lives. Todd had taken a plea deal rather than face a public trial, 3 years in a minimum security prison for fraud and identity theft. Martin Kessler had fled to the Cayman Islands, where he owned property beyond the easy reach of U.S. authorities. Gerald Winters, already disbarred, faced additional legal sanctions that would ensure he never worked in any legal adjacent field again. Lindsay had weathered the professional fallout better than we'd feared. After a 3-month paid leave from Talentech, she'd returned in a lateral position, no longer in operations management but heading a new ethics compliance division that Donovan had created partly for her benefit. Her marriage was over, the divorce finalized with surprising speed given Todd's incarceration and desire to put the whole affair behind him. And me? I'd placed my Talentech shares in a blind trust as planned, stepped back from any involvement in the company's operations and found myself with something I'd rarely experienced. Free time. Time to think, to remember, to plan for a future I hadn't expected to have. That future was taking shape on this crisp October afternoon as I straightened my tie in the hallway mirror. Not the J.C. Penney tie from the company party, but a new one Lindsay had given me. Navy blue silk with tiny silver anchors. "To remind you that you've always been my anchor," she'd said when I unwrapped it. "You look fine, Dad," Lindsay called from the kitchen, where she was arranging cookies on a plate. Store-bought, as neither of us had inherited Catherine's talent for baking. "Stop fussing." "Easy for you to say," I grumbled, but without heat. "You're not meeting a daughter you've never seen before." Lindsay appeared in the hallway, smoothing her own outfit, a casual sweater and jeans that made her look younger than her 38 years. The corporate Polish she'd cultivated for so long had softened in recent months, allowing glimpses of the girl she'd been before ambition and misunderstandings had created walls between us. "She's probably just as nervous," Lindsay reminded me. Maybe more so. She was right, of course. Finding Emma had been surprisingly straightforward once we'd committed to the search. April had passed away 3 years earlier after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer, but Emma still lived in Chicago, working as a pediatric nurse, following in her mother's footsteps. Our initial contact had been through a series of cautious emails, then a few tentative phone calls that had grown progressively longer and more comfortable. DNA testing had confirmed what April had always believed. Emma was indeed my biological daughter. But more meaningful than genetic proof was the connection we'd begun to forge through our conversations, discovering shared traits and interests that transcended the decades of separation. Today would be our first face-to-face meeting. Emma had flown in from Chicago, bringing her husband Michael and their 6-year-old son Joshua, a grandson I hadn't known existed until 2 months ago. The doorbell rang, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my aging body. Lindsay squeezed my arm reassuringly before moving to answer it, and then she was there, Emma, standing in my doorway, 40 years old, with her mother's delicate features and my stubborn chin. Her dark hair was threaded with the same early gray that had marked mine at her age. She hesitated for just a moment before stepping forward, her eyes, so like mine, filling with tears. "Dad," she said simply, testing the word that had waited 4 decades to be spoken between us. I opened my arms without thinking, and she stepped into them as if we'd been rehearsing this moment all our lives. Behind her, a tall man with kind eyes held the hand of a small boy who watched the scene with solemn curiosity. "You must be Michael," I said when Emma and I finally separated, both of us wiping away tears. "And this young man is Joshua?" The boy looked up at me with frank assessment. "Are you really my grandpa? Mom said we didn't have a grandpa before, but now we do." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, a sound of pure joy I hadn't known I was still capable of making. "Yes, I am. And I'm very glad to finally meet you." Lindsay stepped forward then, her own eyes damp. "And I'm your Aunt Lindsay." Emma turned to her half-sister, the sister she'd never known, the woman who shared half her blood but none of her history. There was a moment of awkward uncertainty before Lindsay did what Catherine would have done. She opened her arms in welcome. As the sisters embraced, I felt a presence beside me, not physical, but no less real. Catherine watching over this moment of healing, of family reforged across time and distance. Later, as we sat in my small living room sharing stories and discovering connections, Joshua climbed onto my lap with the easy trust of childhood. "Mom says you fix cars," he announced. "Can you teach me?" "I used to fix cars," I corrected gently. "I'm retired now. But yes, I can teach you some things if your parents don't mind." Emma smiled at her son's enthusiasm. "He's mechanically minded. Takes apart everything he can get his hands on. Michael and I are hopeless with tools." "He gets that from his grandfather," Lindsay said, the word grandfather no longer strange or painful on her lips. "Dad could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it, like some kind of mechanical whisperer." "I still have some of my old tools in storage," I offered. "Nothing fancy, but good for learning the basics." "I'd like that," Emma said softly, "for Joshua to learn from you." The simple sentence contained worlds of meaning. Forgiveness for the past, hope for the future, a bridge across the decades we'd lost. As the afternoon stretched into evening, I watched my daughters, both of them, mine in different ways but equally precious, talking together on the sofa, discovering shared traits neither had known to look for before. Lindsay's ambition tempered by Emma's compassion, Emma's caution balanced by Lindsay's boldness, each finding in the other a missing piece of themselves. Michael caught my eye from across the room and raised his coffee cup in a small salute, acknowledging the miracle we were witnessing. This man who had been father to my child when I couldn't be, who had every right to resent my sudden appearance in their lives, instead offered friendship and understanding. "You raised an amazing woman," I told him quietly when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen later. "So did you," he replied without hesitation. 2 of them, in fact. The simple generosity of his statement brought a lump to my throat. When they finally prepared to leave, back to the hotel tonight, but with promises of another visit tomorrow, Joshua insisted on a hug that nearly broke my heart with its fierce sincerity. Emma embraced me last, holding on as if to make up for all the hugs we'd missed. "Thank you," she whispered against my shoulder, "for finding me, for wanting to know me. I always wanted to know you," I admitted. "I just didn't know how to do it right." She pulled back, studying my face with eyes so like my own. "Mom told me about you, you know. Not just at the end, but throughout my life. She never let me believe you didn't care." The revelation washed over me like a benediction. April, who had every reason to be bitter, had instead given our daughter the gift of knowing she was wanted, even from a distance. After they left, Lindsay helped me clean up, both of us moving in comfortable silence until she finally spoke. "She's really great, Dad. Emma, I can see why you'd be proud of her." "I'm proud of both my daughters," I said firmly. "For different reasons. For being exactly who you are." Lindsay set down the dish towel she'd been holding, her expression serious. "For so long, I was ashamed of where I came from, of you. I wanted to be sophisticated, important, far removed from Lancaster and garages and a father with grease under his fingernails. She shook her head, regret etching lines around her eyes. What a fool I was. Not a fool, I corrected gently. Just someone trying to find her place in the world. We all do that, Lindsay. Sometimes we take wrong turns along the way. She smiled then, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Well, I think I'm finally heading in the right direction. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat at my window watching the city lights shimmer against the darkening sky. In my hand, I held two photographs, one old, one new. The first showed Catherine holding newborn Lindsay, both of them looking up at me with tired, joyful smiles. The second, taken just hours ago, showed my expanded family, Lindsay and Emma side by side, Joshua on my lap, Michael standing behind us all, two images spanning a lifetime, a life that had contained more pain and more joy than I could have imagined when I was just a young mechanic, with dreams of building a family. My name is Calvin Madsen. I'm 72 years old with hands that will never quite come clean, and a heart that has finally found its peace. I spent decades being invisible, the silent investor, the embarrassing father, the secret biological parent, always standing in the shadows so others could shine. But now in the autumn of my life, I've stepped into the light and discovered that being seen, truly seen by the people you love is the greatest investment a man can make. Sometimes the greatest love is invisible, working silently behind the scenes, expecting nothing in return. I spent decades being the foundation that my daughter could stand on without ever letting her know I was there. Was I wrong to keep my investment in her company a secret? Was I wrong to protect her from painful truths about her mother's manipulations, about the possibility of a half-sister? What would you have done in my place? The hardest lesson I've learned at 72 is that secrets, even those kept with the best intentions, eventually surface. And when they do, they can either tear families apart or forge them stronger than before. In the end, it wasn't my financial investment that mattered most, but my investment in truth, in vulnerability, in finally allowing myself to be seen, grease-stained hands and all. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love isn't protection from pain, but the courage to face it together. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Perhaps someone who's struggling with family relationships, someone who feels invisible, or someone who needs to know that it's never too late for healing. Subscribe to my channel for more stories that explore the complicated, beautiful mess that is family. Because in the end, that's the investment that truly matters.